The only thing I feel when I think about my little sister is absolute rage. You know, there is absolutely nothing that Emer could have done or said or anything to justify what happened to her.
Emer O'Loughlin was a 23-year-old student, an art student from County Clare, who was living her best life. She had been travelling, she'd been enjoying college.
From what we gathered was that she was very much interested in art.
I mean, ever since she was small, she used to be doodling and drawing, and anytime she sent me letters to England, there was always a drawing somewhere on it, flowers or whatever, or on the envelope, or she was sort of a deep thinker as well.
Not a person who was interested in material gains, such as cars, you know, a big fancy house, that sort of stuff.
She was a gentle soul. All the people that knew her loved her. She didn't have a bad bone in her body, really. She artistic, gentle, kind sort of person, and lived that sort of lifestyle.
So she was basically living on this piece of land which is on the edge of the Burren, which is essentially a large nature reserve in County Clare. Beautiful piece of land owned by her partner Shane's family. And there was a couple of these mobile homes on it, but they were living in it because they were saving to build a house. There was one other neighbour who was there, a guy called John Griffin. He was a kind of a Galway native, a little bit of a bad boy as such. He was sort of known to be doing drugs and a few things, but nothing really out of the ordinary. That was Emer. They lived this sort of almost slightly bohemian lifestyle, but there was a purpose to it. So there was a fire. That morning, Shane had been speaking to Emer. She had a day off college and had to lie in. But when she rang him, she said the battery on her phone was about to go down and the electricity in their mobile home was gone. So he suggested she went over to John Griffin's and that she charged her phone from there. But as the morning wore on, he wasn't hearing from her. He wasn't getting in touch with her. All of a sudden, there was reports that there had been a fire on the site. And when the services arrived, this fire had absolutely levelled John Griffin's mobile home. No sign of Emer and no sign of John Griffin.
And then, tragically, sadly, unfortunately, then a search took place of the caravan that was burnt out, and charred remains were found there. Well, at that stage, it still wasn't known as to who they were, but there was, you know, at that particular time, obvious suspicions that it could have been Emer.
I think straight away, in my mind, fire, Emer missing, and a body found. I think straight away my mind made up that it was her. Oh, I absolutely, literally broke down, completely broke down. I think I actually walked out of the house and just dropped to my knees in the gravel driveway and just screamed, just absolutely screamed and screamed till I ran out of breath completely.
Initially, the case would have been treated as a suspicious death. There was nothing to believe that she had met her death through any violent means other than a fire, and that's the way, you know, investigators considered it to be at the time, that it was suspicious, but there was nothing to say that it was actually murder.
Griffin's name was in the picture right from the start because it was his mobile home where Emer's body was found. So straight away, he was in the picture. The stories I heard about him were that he was heavily involved in drugs. He was very well known to be violent. People that have contacted me since who knew him in Galway have said he was the type of guy that if he walked into a pub, people would leave because he was just trouble and they just didn't want to be wrapped up in it. Sounds like a very unpredictable type of character, very volatile character.
So John Griffin had gone missing. He hadn't reported the fire at his own property, he hadn't returned to find it, and as such, he had just vanished into thin air. 3 days later, he showed up behaving in a very odd manner on Inishmore, one of the Aran Islands. He had gone up to what's called Dunangus Fort, which is a tourist attraction on the island. Stunning scenery and a sheer cliff drop. And he was behaving in a way that he was sort of throwing stones at tourists, and he was clearly having a mental health incident.
There was serious concerns that he was, going to harm himself, going to commit suicide.
So there sort of was a standoff over a period of a number of hours, and eventually John Griffin, the police, managed to sort of bring him in with them, and he was brought to essentially a hospital in Galway, and he was sectioned in the psych ward. After a few days, he literally signed himself out.
I couldn't understand, why weren't the guards waiting outside that clinic? Why weren't they there to pick him up? Why weren't they watching him?
I don't think that eyes should have been taken off John Griffin when he was in that hospital. I don't think he should have been allowed out.
A number of days later, clothing belonged to him was found back on Inishmore, and then the suspicions were that he had committed suicide. But from that day to this day, no remains have ever been recovered.
It didn't look right. It didn't look like a suicide. The suspicion then was that he'd done a runner. He had tried to stage his own death, and he was gone. Why is a guy like him running? Why is he running away? Why is he staging a suicide?
Interestingly, he's never been reported missing.
Over the years that followed, as the case kind of was stagnant because it was a suspicious death, but they couldn't launch a murder inquiry without a cause of death. It was really until the body of Emer was exhumed, when the newly established Garda Síochána cold case unit was established, that the real cause of death was discovered.
I actually was involved in establishing the cold case, the serious crime review team in 2007. I considered that there was huge potential in the case. We went and did a full review of the case, and one of our findings was that an exhumation should actually take place. To take a decision to have an exhumation is a rather monumental decision to make, because I would always say you're reawakening the dead. You're going to have to exhume the remains of a person who's been buried for a number of years. And that can cause huge emotional turmoil for family. It can cause huge emotional turmoil for people living in the locality, and also neighbours and friends of Emer. So we were very, very conscious of the actions we were recommending. Emer's remains were removed. She had been buried in a wicker coffin, and she was taken to Galway University Hospital, where Dr. Michael Curtis, the state pathologist, was on standby to meet us. He then takes custody of Emer's remains, and he carries out another post-mortem. Within an hour of the examination taking place, he briefs myself and the local superintendent in relation to his findings, and at that point he was satisfied that Emer had died prior to the fire. She had been killed prior to the fire, and that she had been decapitated. This was a huge leap forward from a suspicious death to a murder.
The truth was that Emer had been killed before the fire, and Gardaí were being told that she had, her head had been severed from her body with a sort of a jagged sword or some sort of an implement like that, which, coincidentally, an implement like that had been found in a potbelly stove in John Griffin's mobile home. So all of a sudden, we've a murder inquiry, but the chief suspect is long gone, 5 years on the run, and it doesn't look like he's coming back.
I was just trundling along and just trying to keep going and trying to keep sane and trying to keep up with what was happening at home, any news. I sort of felt that the more information that I could learn, the more I could cope with it. I started looking for Griffin online.
We know very little really about Griffin's whereabouts in the last 20 years. We do know that he went and settled in Scotland in a sort of transient homeless community there. We know he hasn't used his own identity or his passport. He does live a kind of a alternative lifestyle. He won't have bank accounts. He won't own a property. He won't be renting under his own name. He is probably living within a drifter community somewhere.
This very distinctive thing about him is he has a tattoo here on his neck, or he had, and it's the Eye of Horus. And it extends from just here right down into his chest here. So that is very, very distinctive, you know. So he would stand out if he still has that. He's not a quiet person. He can get agitated from time to time, so he will stand out. People will remember him, definitely.
There was tip-offs over the years, one that he was in Morocco and others that he's been in places in Europe, but not very many tip-offs. So wherever he is, he's hiding well.
Most of the sightings, you know, there's nothing behind them. People are very genuine. They want to help, which is great.
You know, a lot of kind of appeals have gone out about this tattoo he has. Is it still there? Has a tattoo artist been asked to remove it? You know, has anybody appeared for laser surgery, etc., looking for that to be removed? Or is somebody very conscious of keeping their neck covered up at all times? Has he spoken to people? Has he boasted to people? Has he confided in anybody over the years? When the tip-off came in about Portugal, it was quite specific in one way. The individual giving the tip-off wanted to remain a little bit of an arm's length from it. And that made me consider that they knew exactly that this was John Griffin. For example, we were told a particular date and a time that Griffin had been outside a Lidl where there were cameras. That was one element. And another element was we were basically given a name of a camping site which he had possibly been seen near. From that point of view, you go on, you have a look at this campsite, you read the reviews. This wasn't a kind of a tourist mecca. It was a kind of a mixed community in it. Some people seem to be living there full time. Some people seem to be living in tents all year round or in sort of makeshift homes on it.
Looking at it and considering it and examining the information, I thought there was a very strong possibility that he was there.
This looked like exactly the sort of place that John Griffin could have been hiding. I think we got as much as we can get as journalists, as investigators. We're not police. We can't go with a warrant looking for CCTV. We did go to the Lidl and we spoke to a manager there who told us that nobody had come looking for the CCTV.
There was a lady there who, you know, was of the belief that she had spotted him. And we spoke to her for a period of time. There was no reason in the world to doubt her in what she was saying, that she spotted him.
When we went down to the village square, you could see that kind of community. There was sort of homeless people who were probably squatting in houses around the area, some of whom maybe were living in the campsite. And we go to the campsite and it does look like exactly the type of place where John Griffin could be. So everything is adding up. A lot of people we spoke to thought, yeah, I might know him. You know, you're asking somebody to look at a picture of him when he was in his late 20s, early 30s. He's now in his 50s. He's going to look different. But there was a kind of a recognition.
Nothing concrete came from, you know, talking to local people, but it certainly generated interest in the area that if he did turn up, people would be aware that authorities in Ireland were actually looking for him. So that alone was very, very important as well.
Is John Griffin there? Was he ever there? We don't know because we don't have the power to discover that. The police do. Has he left? Has he moved onwards? If he has, it's not that cold a trail to follow this time. Like if I was a police officer with more powers, I would certainly be really kicking around there and asking questions. Fingers crossed, I think information comes in and finally maybe the family gets some justice.
Well, frankly, it's destroyed my life, frankly. You know, the amount of opportunities I let go, the amount of things in my life at that time that I got rid of because they just got in the way. Jobs I didn't take, moves I could have made, but I just didn't because this has been all-consuming really for 20 years. I think what I'd say is if anybody ever finds themselves in this situation, fight right from the start, fight, push, constantly keep on them. And if you feel like things aren't going or they're not pursuing like you think, then take it further. Constantly push, constantly keep on top of the guards, constantly check in, demand updates, and don't allow yourself to be fobbed off. If you need to, use the media, use social media and mainstream media as well. Always try and keep the story alive and keep it going.
Emer is not forgotten. She's not forgotten by her family, most importantly. She's not forgotten by her friends, and Garda Síochána hasn't forgotten about her. And that's also very, very important.
Look after yourself, and as much as you start to think that you'll never come out of the other side of it, you do. You're not the same as you were when you went into it, but you do come out the other side.